What's going on, guys? Dylan here again today with another video, another top 10 video for wrestling. Uh, this one is my top 10 all-time favorite wrestling managers. Now, if you are new to professional wrestling, you don't see managers a lot today. Managers, or they were called valets back in the day when it came to the girls, are usually with wrestlers working heels, bad guys. And usually they are the ones who talk for the wrestler. Usually it's done when a certain wrestler is not good on the microphone. So the manager, in a heel sense, would help get heat on the wrestler that they're managing by talking for them and doing the promos. So these are my top 10, my favorites. Two honorable mentions. First is Paul Ellering. A lot of people, he would be a lot higher on other people's list because if you don't know Paul Ellering, he was the original manager of the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. Good manager. I did enjoy watching it, but a lot of the times they worked as babyface, even with Paul Ellering, Precious Paul Ellering, excuse me, and he's also a former wrestler as well. But the reason I did make him an honorable mention at least is because he wasn't just on screen their manager. He was their manager for real. He dealt with their bookings for personal appearances. He made sure they got their rental cars, their hotels. Took care of everything for them. My second honorable mention is a female manager from the original ECW, the head cheerleader, Francine. She was known for managing the Pitbulls, Anthony Durante and Gary Wolfe. And she became most famous in ECW for managing the group for being a part of and managing the group known as the Triple Threat, franchise Shane Douglas, Chris Candido, and Bam Bam Bigelow. And that's where she gained most of her fame. And then she went on, after Shane Douglas, Bigelow, and Candido all left ECW, she began to manage Just Incredible when he went to his singles run as world's champion. I did like Francine. She had that type of accent that, I believe she's from Philadelphia, that Philadelphia accent, and people freaking hated her. A lot of people, and it was worthwhile, but the thing is, as Shane Douglas in the Triple Threat, like around 98, they started to still were heels, but were getting cheered like baby faces because it was cool to be around the Triple Threat and the franchise, and of course, a lot of men in the crowd, and that was most of the ECW crowd back then. The 18 to 34 male demographic were cheering for Francine because she was absolutely gorgeous. She still is very pretty too. I mean, she's aged very well. I don't think she works around the wrestling business anymore. I think she's more focused on her family, so that's cool. Number 10, Sunny, Tammy Lynn Sitch. I love Sunny. And, even with all the downward spirals she's had ever since getting out of the business and all that stuff, I don't look down on her for it. It happens to a lot of people in any kind of entertainment. The spirals, especially when drugs are involved, do happen. Plus the fact that, she was with Chris Candido. That was her boyfriend. I believe they did get married before Chris died, but he died still young. And I think that did bother her a lot. But that's just my opinion. But now, and I have read that she has found love again, so that's cool for Sunny, and she is a WWE Hall of Famer. But the main reason I love Sunny is because heel, babyface, or indifferent, she did her job very well, and she really had an eye for the business. Listening to Jim Cornette talk about her and how much of an upfront bitch she was, at least she knew she was a bitch, and she accepted it and took pride in it. That's why some people have no problem with her, even though she was a bitch, to a lot of people, from what I've heard. Unlike, and once again, going back to Jim Cornette, unlike Sable, who was go behind your back and be bitchy. she'd be nice to you up front and then go behind your back and talk shit. That's what I've heard about Sable and Sunny. So I've always enjoyed watching. I love watching Sunny for the most part in the late 90s WWE, and also in her time in ECW. I didn't watch WCW too much back then when she was there, which was like 2000, 2001, in the WCW's dying years. But Sunny's my number 10. My number 9, the late great Paul Bearer, also known as Percy Pringle, when he worked Texas and Mid-South and the other territories. But most famous as the manager of The Undertaker. I believe that nobody else, no other manager could have helped with The Undertaker and been that mouthpiece other than Paul Bearer. Because one, the gimmick worked perfectly because he was a licensed mortician, which is the reason they gave him the gimmick. He said in the past in interviews before he passed away that was the main thing for the gimmick, is that he was a real mortician. And so you put a mortician with The Undertaker, and it just blends. You know? So Paul Bearer's my number 9. My number 8, Paulie Dangerously, Paul Heyman. Once again, if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. Because I'm not able to remember this yet. I don't know how to keep it on my screen while I record. But number 8, Paul Heyman. Most famously known as the creator of ECW. Not really the creator, but the guy who was booking it and got it to its exposure and national exposure. I mean, without Paul Heyman, it would have just ended up being another dead territory with National Wrestling Alliance. It's obvious. Because before Paul Heyman, it was NWA's Eastern Championship Wrestling. And it was just floundering, pretty much. They were relying on old stars. Guys that were, past their prime. They're the first ever ECW champion. If you count the Eastern Championship Wrestling champions, it was Jimmy Snuka, I believe. So, but Paul Heyman as a manager, he managed so many different guys, but his most notable one was when he managed the original Midnight Express, Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey against Jim Cornette's Midnight Express of Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. Great feud. Even Cornette and Heyman got in the ring themselves and had it out. I loved that stuff. Number 7, Class A Freddie Blassie. And in the words of Class A Freddie Blassie, listen up, you pencil neck geeks. I'm talking about Freddie Blassie. This guy, as a wrestler, was one of the most feared because he was violent before violent was normal in wrestling. Because he'd do things like bite. I mean, he would bite people. Like that was where he'd buzz somebody open and bite where he got them busted open at and sucked the blood pretty much. Blassie was crazy, and he was hated and feared. And as a manager, he was one of the greatest managers. He managed Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan was a good guy. When Hulk Hogan was a bad guy, when he first came into WWE back in the 70s, when it was WWF, Hogan was a bad guy. Blassie was his manager. Blassie managed Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov at the very first WrestleMania and helped them get a tag team title victory using that cane, and hit their opponents with it behind the referee's back and broke the cane over the guy's head. I don't remember who they faced. But, so Blassie is my number 7. My number 6, another ECW guy. The manager of champions, the man who calls it right down the middle. Fonzie, Bill Alfonso. Most known for managing Taz, Rob Van Dam, and Sabu. He's also a former referee. But becoming his most, a lot of managers have an item or something they do that they're remembered for. Bill Alfonso, that stupid whistle. No matter who he was managing, whether it was Taz or after he turned on Taz and began managing Sabu and Van Dam, he'd blow the whistle constantly during matches. Constantly. And it made you want to take that whistle and shove it somewhere that the sun don't shine, if you catch my drift. Because it's annoying. you're trying to watch a match and you hear a whistle constantly, like a referee whistle going off constantly during the entire match. And his voice, you'd hear him talk. You have to really listen sometimes when he's talking because he has his voice and that little bit of an accent he has. Sometimes it can be hard because he does speak with a little bit of speed. But he's just, it's obvious he had to manage guys like Sabu, Taz, and Van Dam, guys who could fight, or in Sabu's case, guys that could possibly maim you and maim themselves in the process. Because you knew he couldn't wrestle. He was involved in one of the bloodiest matches in ECW history against Beulah McGillicuddy, Tommy Dreamer's now wife and manager at the time. I believe the story was Fonzie lost a third of a pint of blood, which is a lot of blood, and lost. I mean, that proves how tough he was too, because he didn't back down. So Fonzie's my number 6. My number 5, another one who's no longer with us, Sensational Sherry. Sherry Martel, Queen Sherry, whatever you want to call her. She's managed people like the Harlem Heat, Booker T and Stevie Ray. She managed Macho Man when he was doing the Macho King thing. She managed Shawn Michaels. Those 3 right there. She's also a former ladies champion, I believe, in the AWA. And she was known as a Hellcat. She was crazy. And she was tough as nails. I remember when she was inducted in the Hall of Fame, she was telling the story of when she went to the wrestling school. I can't remember whose wrestling school it was, but she put the money on the table and basically told the guy she wanted to train to be a wrestler. And he hauled off and smacked her as hard as he could and said, "You sure you want to do it?" And she goes, "Yeah, is that all you got?" And he trained her. And I wish I could remember his name. So Sherry is my number 5. Number 4, the Brain, Bobby the Brain Heenan. He has managed so many guys. It's hard to remember. Austin Idol, and I believe it was Playboy Buddy Rose that were a tag team. It's hard for me to remember. I didn't watch a lot of AWA. But he's also managed Hercules, in WWE alone, managed Hercules Hernandez. He managed Andre the Giant, Haku. Some people know him as Meng. So many guys. The Heenan family. And he's considered, in a lot of people's minds, he is the greatest manager of all time. Me, he's my number 4, because there's 3 ahead of him. But Bobby the Brain Heenan, unfortunately, he died a few years ago too. A lot of the managers on here are no longer with us. But Bobby, he made you hate him. Like a lot of these managers on here. You hated that little, what people called the weasel. He was a weasel. And WWE, they used that back in the 80s. Every so often, they'd put Heenan in the ring because he could work. And they'd have him lose, get knocked out, and whoever basically beat him would stuff him in a weasel suit so the fans could watch him squirm while they chanted "Weasel, Weasel, Weasel." So that's why Bobby Heenan is my number 4, my number 3. A lot of people call her the original diva in professional wrestling, the first lady of professional wrestling. She's most notably, she is most known for managing the Macho Man, Randy Savage, before he turned heel. And when he first started as a heel as well. Miss Elizabeth. She also managed Lex Luger in WCW. She managed Ric Flair in WCW when they reformed the Horsemen. But as Miss Elizabeth in WWE, watching her stand by her man and Macho Man Randy Savage. I believe those, you hear the stories. You hear all the stories about how horrible Macho Man was to Liz. And Lanny Poffo, Macho Man's brother, Leapin' Lanny, he said that they're over-exaggerated. Was he protective? Was he paranoid? Was he jealous of anybody that came near her? Yeah. But, he worshipped her. But obviously he was too clingy and all that stuff. It was obviously too much for Liz, and they did file for divorce. But I believe, at one point they were a match made in heaven, and they were. You know, I still remember, even though I wasn't alive when it happened, even though it was before my time, I've gone back and see it when Macho Man in the middle of the ring proposed to Liz, and her answer, she just didn't give a yes. She went, "Ooh yeah," and Macho Man's face was priceless. She worked well as a heel manager too in WCW and the uh, mid to late '90s with Ric Flair and the rest of the Horsemen. And there are other female manager I'm going to talk about in a minute, but it just wasn't the same. And then they had her do an angle with Goldberg, like how he was stalking her or something. It was just a failed gimmick. Excuse me. Gotta stay hydrated. Quarantine sucks. Anyway. And no, I'm not quarantined because I have it. I'm trying to keep from getting exposed. So, number 2, we're getting up there. And before I get to my number 2, I did think of another honorable mention, and now I've lost it again. If it comes back to me by the time I get to the end of the list, I'll bring it up. Anyway, number 2, another one no longer with us, and this one is even a more tragedy because even though she was innocent in the tragedy that took her life, WWE is never going to mention her, and she is Hall of Fame worthy, and it's a shame. And that is woman Nancy Benoit. I don't want to say victim, even though she was, of her husband, Chris Benoit. She's also the ex-husband of Kevin Sullivan, who she managed for a long time. There was something about her. I didn't see her work with Kevin Sullivan until much, much later. First time I saw woman, Nancy. It's easier to call her Nancy for me. Even though I never know her personally, woman, it sounds so impersonal, even though that was her gimmick, was when I first got the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD. And I put in the second disc with just some bonus matches. And I watched a match. It was a ladder match for the ECW World Title, not your normal ladder match. The ladder is just in play as a weapon. You win by pinfall or submission. That's how ECW did it, I guess. It was Sandman defending his title against Mikey Whipwreck, and Nancy was in Sandman's corner, and she just had this look about her. She was drop dead gorgeous. You didn't really see her smile a lot when she was at work, but if you see pictures of her in her personal life, with her family, I just watched the Vice Land documentary thing about the tragedy of the murder-suicide of Nancy Benoit, Chris Benoit, and their son Daniel. But I saw the pictures of them on their wedding day, and Nancy's smile was a mile long. You could tell they really did love each other. And I'm not going to get in the whole Benoit thing. I'll save that for my next video, my next top 10, because Chris Benoit is involved in it. But she also worked with the Four Horsemen as a manager. She managed the Sandman. She managed quite a lot of people. And, a lot of people don't know what happened with her and Kevin Sullivan. There's allegations that he was very, very physically abusive towards her. And also what really started it, what drove her to Chris Benoit, was a booking angle with pitting Benoit against Sullivan, where in the storyline, Nancy was to leave Sullivan for Benoit. And then life imitated art. And they, Chris helped Nancy get out of the abusive situation. She fell in love with Chris. So, woman, Nancy Benoit, also known as the Fallen Angel in Florida Championship Wrestling. She's my number 2. And now it's time to get the number 1. Before I do that, I want all of you watching this to please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Leave a like. Comment. Please comment. Because the more comments, the more I can get seen. Share the video out with everybody. Anybody that likes wrestling and likes seeing videos and discussing this type of stuff, please direct them to my channel. I'm trying to make a living of this, or at least bringing some extra money. But and also, when I hit either 25 or 50 subscribers, I'm thinking of doing a live stream to do wrestling discussion. So anyway, and also if you subscribe, or if you already subscribed and you don't want to miss videos, you don't want to be late to the party, hit that notification bell. Now on to our number one. I love this guy. I listen to his podcast every week. I listen to The Experience and The Drive-Thru. That is James E. Mr. Jim Cornette, the manager of the Midnight Express, the Heavenly Bodies, the new Midnight Express, which we won't talk about. He managed Dan the Beast Severn and the rest of the NWA stable in WWE in 97, 98, which was guys like Dan Severn, the Rock and Roll Express, Barry Windham, Jeff Jarrett. God, so many people. So many people. He managed Yokozuna and Owen Hart when they were tag champions. He managed Vader, excuse me. I love Jim Cornette. I don't know how anyone else to say it. He's funny. Him and I have a lot in common when it comes to views and all that stuff, which I'm not going to get into. If you've listened to his podcast, you know what I'm talking about. One of them, I will say, we both have a pretty big dislike for Vince Russo, that's for sure, and garbage wrestling. But he's one of the great. I believe he's the greatest manager of all time. He wouldn't say that. He would say that it's Heenan, but I think he's the best. And when it comes to Cornette, if you can't go back and watch his promos from when he was in the business, listen to his podcast. If you don't want to listen to the whole podcast, I'm sure you could find clips and snippets of some of the best moments of shoot interviews and all this different stuff. I think he's a riot. And, and of course he's mostly now, working with his website. And living his life with his family, with his wife, Stacy, who was also in the wrestling business in OVW. If you watched OVW back when it first started, the Disciples of Sin. If you remember Sin, the manager of the group, that is Jim Cornette's now wife, which he picked a good one. I've actually seen some of her work from OVW. I hated her. She made me hate her. So she was a good manager. Obviously, I didn't see enough of her to be able to put her on my list, but so that's my list for today. That's my top 10 managers. I wish I could remember that other honorable mention, and I really can't. It really, really, really irritates me that I can't remember it, and it's driving me nuts. I wish I could think of it, and I can't. And I had another one in my head that I just thought of halfway through the list. Oh well, maybe I'll make another list. Maybe I'll add on to it, add some more honorable mentions one day. But if you like the video, please sure to like, subscribe, leave comments, and share, and hit that notification bell. Have a good one, guys.